Welcome back. In the next phase of the class, we will learn some things that I specifically wanted you to know about using Excel that weren't really covered well in any basic textbooks. In this problem, we will learn how to sort databases using basic menu-driven sorting techniques that will work well with smaller ranges of data. In addition, we will introduce you to a very powerful database search technique using pivot tables. Pivot tables are one of Excel's most powerful features. A pivot table allows you to extract significant items from a large detailed data set. Among other functions, a pivot table can automatically sort, count, total, or average the data stored in one table or spreadsheet, while displaying the results in a second table, the pivot table, showing the summarized data. We will talk more about pivot tables later. Many firms and many job descriptions list familiarity with pivot tables as a necessary or required skill. This is the reason I decided to include a problem such as this. As always, you should have found and printed out the problem in Canvas. In this problem, we will use a database related to a bank. You should have downloaded the Excel file prior to watching this video. If you haven't yet done that, please pause this and do so now. The objectives of this problem are to learn how to analyze and sort large databases using sorting functions as well as pivot tables, to be able to analyze, summarize, explore, manipulate, and report data, be able to use pivot table reports to easily see comparisons, patterns, and trends, and finally to be able to use the chart features within the pivot table. This slide is just a reminder of how points are awarded. In this problem, since you will be completing a series of sorts, please make sure you document which sort you are doing on every tab or worksheet. That's part of following the directions, which is the first bullet point on this slide. This will be critically important. In general, a sort is of no value if you cannot communicate to the user what the data represents and any conclusions you have made or reached by the sort. Pivot tables represent a more advanced topic than some of the other items we've been discussing. You must do some preparatory work prior to attempting this problem. Pause this video right now and watch the 2 required short videos on pivot tables. The active links are located not only on this slide, but within the Canvas module itself. So again, please stop the video and go watch these external videos now if you have not yet done so. Also, you should have read Chapter 10 in your step-by-step book. Only after you have educated yourself and performed these preliminary steps are you ready to continue. So once again, please do not even attempt to try this problem without completing the preparatory steps. If you don't follow directions, I can guarantee that you will become frustrated using this problem. Take a moment to read this slide and absorb it. This slide defines some basic sorting steps using the built-in sort feature. First, we will define the data. This is critically important. Then we will sort the data using primary and secondary sorts. We will then perform any desired computations and present our data appropriately. This basic sorting technique used within the Excel program is easy and useful for small data sets. So here's what we're going to do. Let me preview the steps and then we'll demonstrate them. We're first going to copy the data that you downloaded to a new worksheet that we'll call Sorted Data. We'll set the data range. Then we'll choose the data and sort options. We'll select a primary sort, which will be the amount in this case, and a secondary sort, which is used to break ties. We'll use customer type for this sort. And when we're done, go ahead and play around with the different sorting options so you can see what Excel is capable of. We will do one last sort by day and then by amount, and that'll be the sort that we save. And we'll add a total at the bottom. So again, don't hesitate to play around, try out the different options. You can't mess it up. If for some reason you happen to mess it up, you always have the basic data to go back to. So here's the Excel data file that you should have downloaded from the Canvas website. And you'll notice that this data set contains, it looks like, 6 columns. They include the date, the amount, the account type, the opened by, the branch, and the customer. Those are found at the very first line item. So what we're going to do is to preserve the integrity of this data just in case you need it again. We're going to copy this data from the current tab, which is called raw data, to a new worksheet called sorted data. So probably the easiest thing is to go over here to the select all button and left click it and then copy, and then we're going to paste it to a new worksheet. So let me go ahead and take care of that. So again, all I've done so far is just copy and pasted, and we're going to call this new worksheet sorted data. Now we want to select the appropriate data range. That means you want to highlight all the cells from corner to corner. In our case, we'll highlight from A1 all the way down to F713. So you'll have to scroll down to the very bottom corner. Whoops, my mouse kind of took off on me. There, missed it. Let me start from the bottom and go up. Maybe that might be easier for you also. So again, I'm highlighting the data from corner to corner. For me, it's easy to start from the bottom and go up, but whatever you want to do is fine. We call this step selecting the data range. This is critically important. Ideally, there should be no blank rows or columns within the range. In fact, it's best if there are no blank cells. Although this is not considered a critical error and Excel can still perform the sort accurately. So just make sure there's no blank columns or blank lines within the data sort. So we're going to play around with the sort options. So once you have the data highlighted or the data range set, choose the sort options. So here it's going to be data. Here's the sort. And you'll notice that we can set parameters right here. So this is what we call the primary sort. This is how we want the first sort to be selected. And again, play around with these. On the final sort, the one I want you to save, we're going to sort the data by day. So I'm going to choose by date. And I'm not sure if I told you to go from highest to lowest or lowest to smallest. I'm going to go from lowest to oldest, newest to oldest. And then because I expect there to be ties, that means I expect there to be matches on the dates. We're going to go ahead and add a secondary sort. And again, I believe that I asked you to do it by amount. And on the amount, we want to go in descending order. That means from largest to smallest. So I'm going to press OK, and you'll notice what happened. Whoops, and I think I probably want to change that. It looks like I went from the oldest to the newest. I'm going to change that. So let me go back to the data sort, and on that first feature I'm going to change from the oldest to the newest. Let me press OK. Okay, so then if I go back up to the top, I'll see the oldest ones first. So all the September 1st are in the same area, and then within that we set a secondary sort for the amount. So within the September 1st, you'll see all the amounts going from highest to lowest. And then when you get to September 2nd, again, you'll see all the amounts going from highest to lowest. So go ahead and put a total at the bottom to add up all the amounts of the balances at this bank. So I'm scrolling down. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to put in a summation. And there we go. We got our grand total there. And also, I'm going to put a couple decimal places just for my own purposes. I'd like the data to look a little bit different. So there's the total grand amount of deposits. Okay, that's what we call just using basic sorting techniques in Excel. Okay, you can see that that was kind of time consuming because there's lots of data to sort. There's another powerful feature called pivot tables, but I don't want you going there until you try sorting this again. Play around with the different sorts. As always, as mentioned earlier, make sure you document your sort. So I'm going to insert a row or two here, and I'm going to tell the user what this sort represents. So for example, I might put this sort is by date and by amount. And if you could further document it if you wanted, the date is oldest to newest and the amount is highest to lowest. Okay, so again, a sort should stand on its own. When someone looks at your work, they should not have to guess what it is that you're showing. Okay, so I'm going to pause this now because I want you to play around. I'm going to save my work, and you can read through the handout and find out what the save as name should be. I'm not concerned about that. I'm going to come back and go to the PowerPoint demonstration and continue learning about pivot tables. View of using the basic sorting feature in Excel. Once again, we copied the data to a new worksheet to preserve the raw data's integrity. We set the data range by copying or by selecting the cells from the left corner to the bottom right corner. We chose data and then sort. We selected the primary and secondary sorts in case there were ties, and we performed the sort. I believe we added a total at the bottom, and hopefully you played around with a couple different sorts to see how this works. That in itself is nice to know when you're working with lots of data. Now we're ready to move on to a much more powerful feature called pivot tables. A pivot table is a program tool within Microsoft Excel that allows you to reorganize and summarize selected columns and rows of data in a spreadsheet or database table to obtain a desired report. A pivot table doesn't actually change the spreadsheet or data itself. And again, once again, before we continue, let me get rid of that reminder. Before we continue, make sure that you've watched those 2 introductory videos noted in the Canvas module, and you should have read Chapter 10 before we go on. So what are pivot tables used for? They are a great way to summarize, analyze, explore, and present your data. And you can create them with just a few clicks. I'm going to demonstrate that shortly. Pivot tables are highly flexible and can be quickly adjusted depending on how you need to display your results. You can also create pivot charts based on the pivot tables that will automatically update when your pivot table updates. So let's get started. In this first step, or in this first pivot table, we're going to go over the basic steps. So we are going to specify or define the data, just like we did in the previous example. Then we're going to specify the location for the pivot table. We're going to lay out the pivot table by choosing how we want the table to look. We'll then format the pivot table just like we format regular data. and then we'll modify the pivot table to report the desired questions. So let's go back to the Excel worksheet. So once again, here's the Excel spreadsheet. Are you ready for your first pivot table? In the first pivot table, we will be asking the computer to display all accounts opened by branch and by account type. You notice there was 700 lines of data in our database, and we want to summarize the data. And again, we're asking the computer to display all accounts opened by branch and by account type. Think about that for a second and visualize what a report might look like. Remember, we had hundreds of lines of data, and we're asking the computer to pivot or move the data in a very specific way. Ready? First thing we want to do is copy the original data, that would be this raw data here, from that worksheet into a new worksheet which we'll call table data. So again, the easiest way is to select all, then copy, and go to your new worksheet and press paste. So there's the data again. We're going to call this table data. Pivot tables only work with tables. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change this data into a table. So we're going to choose Insert Table, and first I need to select it. So let me go ahead and select that data again by moving it all the way from corner to corner. It probably would have been better had I started at the bottom and gone up. Make sure you don't include any blank rows. So there, I've selected the data. I'm going to go back and insert the table, and it's going to ask me, where do you want the data? Right here is fine. So you can see what it did. It changed the way your data looks, and it put a bunch of drop-down boxes up here in the title line. So this is necessary to allow the pivot table features to work properly. Now we need to make the table active by clicking on it anywhere. So I'm going to click on any cell in my data table, and now we're ready to pivot or reorganize the data. So we're going to go to Insert, and then we're ready to insert the pivot table, and the question's going to come up, where do you want the data? And we are going to put it in a new worksheet, which is pretty normal, so I'll press OK. And now we have the chance to pivot or change or reorganize the way we want our data shown. So again, we are going to ask the computer to display all the accounts opened by branch and by account type. So think about what you would want your table to look like. Here's one example. I can envision the account types going in the rows. So I'm going to drag that account type down here to the rows section. Again, visualize before moving on what that means. That means that going down the left-hand side of your spreadsheet in the rows field, we will see the various types of accounts listed. Then we want to tell the computer what it is we want to show. We want to show the value or the amount of the accounts. So I'm going to put that and drag it down to the values column, and you can see what happens, kind of a live preview of what it's going to look like. So before we go any further, notice that the computer did exactly what you told it to do. It put the account types in the rows, and it put the values there on the screen. And now we're going to drag the branch to the column labels, because we said that we wanted to know what the accounts were by branch. So since we've already used the rows part, we'll copy or drag the branch down to the columns. Now again, look what happened. We have the account type showing in the rows. We have the various branches showing in the column. And we have done what the computer asked us to do, but it looks pretty crappy. So now we're going to get ready to format our sort. So again, I want you to think about what happened. We are pivoting or searching the database to meet our requirements. The program is reorganizing the data based on the parameters we set up. You may want to take a minute and pause this video and think through what we just did. You may even want to try it again. Again, this is a very powerful feature within Excel. It pays to spend or invest the time to understand what you are learning. Let's label this new worksheet, this new pivot table, item 1. So again, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to put in, this is item 1 because that's what the directions told me to do. And then don't forget to document the sort. So this sort shows, spell check yourself at the end, this sort shows the summary of all accounts by type and by branch. Something as simple as that. Again, you're letting the user know what this pivot table is doing. And to reactivate the pivot table, click anywhere in it and your screen will come up. And again, take a while to play around with this thing. In other words, what if you switched out the rows and made them columns and these branches would be going down the row? Take a second and watch and see what happens. I'm going to switch the columns and the rows. I'm going to drag the branch over to the rows and the account type over to the columns. And do you see what happened? The data was pivoted, but now instead of having the account types here, we now have them in the columns. So let me change it back so we can get back to our sort. And my table looks terrible right now. So the next step would be to format the data to make it look nice. So I'm going to highlight those, maybe give it a column format so it looks a little bit nicer. And you notice that some of the columns now are not as wide as they need to be. So let me make them a little bit wider, and that's a pretty nice looking sort. So that's how we do item 1. Are you ready to try another one? If not, pause this video and go practice manipulating the first pivot table that we did. Before we start our next sort, let's just take a moment to review how we created the previous sort. So again, think about what we did. We copied the original data into a new worksheet. We called it table data. We inserted a table because pivot tables functions only work with tables. We made the table active by clicking on it. Then we inserted a pivot table. And in order to tell the computer what we wanted to show, we dragged the account type to the rows because we wanted to see the account types listed in the rows. And then we dragged the amount to the values box because we were interested in seeing the amount of the deposits. And then we dragged the branch to the column labels because we wanted the branches to go across the top. Once again, I would encourage you to pause the video and maybe try it again without the directions in front of you to see if you understand how the pivot table works. Now we're ready to go on and start a second sort. Okay, to get further practice and to show you how to filter the results, we're going to start our second pivot table sort. So let's read through this slide together and then we'll go through it step by step in Excel. So visualize what you want your results to look like. Visualize what columns you would like to see going across the top of the spreadsheet and what type of data you would like to see going down the rows. Once you figure that out, you're ready to drag and drop the various elements to the appropriate box. Don't worry if it takes you a couple of tries to do it correctly, and don't worry if you're confused a little bit after the first one. The more practice you get, the easier it will become. It takes some thought. So in this next sort, which is entitled sort number 2 on your directions, we are interested in coming up with a summary of new accounts. Highlight the word new accounts, opened by branch and by account type. So this is exactly the same as the first sort that we did, except now we want to only filter the new accounts. So we'll be working on item 2. Are you ready? So to give us more practice, we are ready to do exactly the same sort that we just got done doing, except this time we're going to set a filter. So once again, to review the steps, I'm going to go back to my raw data. I'm going to press the Select All button. I'm going to copy the data to a new tab or a new worksheet, and I'm going to paste the data. And then I'm going to select the appropriate data in order to do my pivot table. Again, sometimes it's easier to scroll down to the bottom and select it. This time I chose to go up to the top. In order to get the pivot data tables to work, we first need to insert a table. So again, we've done nothing new yet in this one. We're just repeating the same steps from the other one. So I'll go ahead and change that data into a table. And now I'm ready to insert a pivot table. And it's asking me, where would you like to put it? I'd like to put it in a new worksheet. So now we're ready to create the exact same pivot table that we did before, which means we wanted the account types to be going down the rows. We wanted the amounts to be shown as the value. And we wanted the branch to be shown in the columns. And again, we have the exact same pivot table as before, but now we want to add a filter. So I realize that my numbers look icky right now. We'll fix that at the end. Right now I want to demonstrate how to do a filter. So again, in this filter, we only want to show new accounts. So that would be the opened by, or excuse me, that would be the customer. So I'm going to grab that and move it down to the filter. And now I can use this drop down box to choose just new. And what that does, it will pivot the data, sort through it, and come back with only the new accounts. So let me press OK. And you'll see what happens. Now we don't have all the accounts. We filtered it to just show the new accounts. And again, my data doesn't look too great right now. So I'm going to go ahead and format my data to look the way I like. And again, that's up to you. But usually when we deal with large numbers, it's nice to have at least some commas in there. And you may find that you need to widen a column to show the whole thing. So we want to document our sort again. So go ahead and insert a couple lines near the top so that we can demonstrate what this sort is. And let me come over here and insert the rows. There we go. And once you create some space, you can document what your sort did. So on this one, maybe I'll write summary of new accounts sorted by branch and by type. Okay, and that's how you would do a pivot table using a sort. I believe that the instruction said to call this one item 2. And you can see that we did that in a fairly short amount of time. And again, I want you to realize what's taken place. We took 700 and something rows of data, and rather than going through a bunch of manual sorts like we did in the first step, we were able to pivot the data by selecting the fields and rows that we wanted the various items to appear in. In this specific sort, we showed the amounts of the data. Notice that if you click on the pivot table, the fields come up again and you can change anything you want. So I would save my work right now according to the save directions, but let me just show you, if we wanted to show something other than the values, we could come over here and we could change the settings, and maybe we would want to show the count instead of the value. So I could click a different sum over here. Again, I've saved the work. I'm done with the second sort. I just want to demonstrate a couple more things before I close out this video. I could change the value to be the count of new accounts. And within a second, you can see what happened. It's still the new accounts, but now it's not the dollar values that's showing. It's the number of accounts opened by type and by branch. So again, there's lots of powerful features. We are just exploring the very beginnings. Let me put it back to the dollars here before I leave you. I hope you see the incredible power you have with pivot tables. There's many databases that has tens of thousands of rows. Data mining is a huge field right now. And if you're interested in a Big Four firm, if you're an accounting major and you're interested in working in a Big Four firm, the ability to be able to manipulate and sort through vast amounts of data is an incredibly important skill in today's workplace. So we've done the first two sorts together. We've learned how to create a pivot table. We've learned how to change rows and columns. We've learned how to filter the data. I've given you some examples of how to present the data. You saw in some sorts we wanted the numeric values in dollars, and on that last one we changed it to be a count. Again, play around with the data. You can't mess it up because you always have the original data to go back to. So again, this problem serves as just a brief introduction to the value of pivot tables, and I hope you can see the value that having this knowledge would help you with in the workplace. It was very important to me to show you this skill before we left the Excel classroom. So here's just a brief summaries of the rules or the steps that you should follow. You should read the handout. You should have watched the two basic videos, which are external links to another educational site. You should have read chapter 10 in your step-by-step book. You should have reviewed this video maybe even more than once. You should have created the various sorts and pivot tables requested in the handout, and there was a required chart. At the end, make sure that your data is organized. Please put the worksheets in the proper order, which means you may have to move some tabs. You just drag on the tab and move it to the place that you wanted. And upload one final file with all completed sorts on it. I don't want 10 files. I want one file with all the various worksheets labeled. What's next? Well, complete the problem according to the directions. Always double check the requirements. Make sure your work prints out properly. After double checking that you've completed all parts of the problem, upload the one final Excel file to Canvas, or to me through Canvas, and check to see if there's any discussion post that applies to this problem. As always, if you need help, just ask. You know where to find me by now, and I hope you know that there are lots of tutorial labs and also an individual tutor ready to help you. I'm in my office every morning and love spending time with students. I've had probably half of the class come in to see me during regular office hours, which is a great thing. I love putting names to faces. And again, I hope you found this problem useful. I'm here to help you along the journey. I love what I do, and I look forward to hearing any kind of feedback that you want to share on this problem. Until next time, I'm signing off.